you're developing technology in very intense ways, or you're building technology in very intense ways for others to use to build more technology. That's kind of how I think of the developer ecosystem. So I thought I'll just walk you through 6 imperatives that I think are very important for all of us. The first one is the cloud. We're still in the early innings of the cloud. Because here's the thing. If you take this one stat around how many apps are really, really cloud native, it's still a very low number. And cloud native is what? 10x, maybe 50x better in terms of just sheer throughput based on whatever you did in the previous generation to what you could do being cloud native, right? Being event driven, being functions. All of these things are going to completely transform the footprint of your application. And not to mention, by the way, the efficiency, right? Moving to the cloud is the best way to hedge against energy prices. In fact, the fact that it's what, 90%, 80% and more efficient, this is the best way to help even with energy transition. Demand, right? Because one of the things is if demand is uncertain, the best way to hedge is to sort of be much more on the cloud so that you are hedged on demand. So I think the cloud is very early on. Don't bet against the cloud is the basic mantra, which is just go ride the cloud economic wave in terms of your applications. Now, we're obviously expanding. We have 60 plus regions, 200 plus data centers in India. We have 3 regions, a 4th region coming up. So we are definitely investing our capital to build all the compute infrastructure so that you benefit from having compute infrastructure that's world-class for you to build your applications. Now, the cloud is just not going to remain in data centers. The cloud is going to distribute itself. Distributed computing will always remain distributed. And Azure Arc for us has been actually a pretty major breakthrough, even in the last couple of years. It's helped us take and embed compute in a factory, in warehouses, in retail outfits, because the world, especially with 5G and what comes after with low latency access to the edge, you will have a distributed computing fabric that spreads across. And so we're building out the software stack and the hardware stack so that we can embed computing in the real world. And we have significant momentum right here in India. When I look at it, like whether it's the conglomerates of the Tatas, the Adanis, the Geos, and everything that they're doing, it's sort of complete night and day from a few years to where they are in terms of their cloud intensity. Whether it's the startups that are all here today, right? All using and really scaling and building world-class infrastructure. And of course, our global SI partners who are not only using it to build their own infrastructure, but again, scaling it for everyone in the world. So there's just tremendous amount of momentum when it comes to the cloud. Now, let's move to the next area. The thing that everybody is buzzing about is AI. And here's one fascinating stat. Today, when you think about AI, data that's generated through generative models, it's pretty much nothing. It's less than 1%. But it's expected to grow to large double-digit numbers pretty soon. And you see it. You go. So I said, let's have some fun with these generative models. So I went and asked Dolly to dream of the future of Bengaluru. It came up with some pretty nice pictures. I think, look at that, huh? That's where I want to live. It's beautiful. So I said, okay, let's take the other generative model that people talk about. Let's ask it about the future of Bangalore. So we went to ChatGPT and said, give us, what do you think is the future of Bangalore? It had a lot of nice things to say about all of you folks, let me tell you. You're all brilliant, you're all great, except you got to solve the traffic problem. But it is beautiful. Like it sort of at least has a lot of optimism for what's going to happen. So then I said, okay, let's really ask it the question. What about the South Indian tiffins? How would you rank order them? So it came back with all of these things that I wish I could have for breakfast every day. And then I said, for some reason it thinks biryani is a tiffin, but the last time I checked, it was not. But I love biryani too, so I kind of gave it the prompt. I don't think so, and then it apologized to me very politely and said, as a Hyderabadi, you can't insult me by saying biryani is a tiffin. And then so I said, okay, why don't you write a play where the idli argues against the dosa as to who is the better tiffin in the world? And it did it. And then I said, why don't we make it a Shakespearean play? And it went on and brought out the best of Shakespeare in South Indian tiffin genre. So, I mean, it's all fun. It's just fascinating to see how these generative models are capturing the imagination, right? The question is, what is all this? To me, what it is it's a reasoning engine that I think we can use as frontline workers, as knowledge workers, as any professional doing any design task, any creation task, to truly have this be a co-pilot that helps us do whatever task we are setting out to do more creatively, more productively, bring out more ingenuity, break down some of the barriers, the learning curves for every one of us. So I think it's a golden age. It depends. There will definitely be unintended consequences that we will have to guard against. So AI ethics, AI safety, alignment with human preferences, these are huge topics. Displacement is going to be a huge topic. But we have to take those all as first-class considerations. What is possible? What are the unintended consequences? And work on them as a developer community, as a community of digital enthusiasts who then really make sure that the ultimate benefits of this can be realized. By the way, the first thing, though, we also have to really get our act together in terms of how we manage the data infrastructure. In a world where all this data is getting generated, one of the things that's going to be very needed is, do we have the robust scale data infrastructure for all this variety, all this volume, all this velocity? And the good news is we've been at it, right? Just like the cloud has helped us create the AI, even the data platforms are in a state where we can deal with this, and of course it has to evolve. At Microsoft, we're building out all of this infrastructure for all the operational stores, the connecting those up, whether it's sort of Cosmos DB, which is a regionless scale database, or SQL, or then to be able to directly using Synapse Link connected to the analytics, right? There's a real-time connection between what is operational and analytics. And then have governance, because after all, data provenance is going to be a massive thing, right? Which is, where was I trained? How was this model trained? What is happening in terms of information leakage or not? These are all going to be very, very important considerations for everyone. So really thinking about the data fabric that is truly coming together in support of large-scale AI training and large-scale AI inference, both of those, is, I think, going to be one of the big considerations. So we are building that. The second thing that also we need to build, as I said, in order to have these large models, you need world-class AI infrastructure. And whether it's on training or an inference. And this is where we at Microsoft with Azure have gotten ahead. And it's thanks to sort of the partnership with OpenAI and the feedback loop there and what we have built. And you can, do your own benchmarks today in terms of large-scale training and large-scale inferencing. We have the best infrastructure. And the uniqueness there is, in fact, building out not just having the right silicon. Of course, that's where we've partnered deeply with NVIDIA, but also to be able to think about the full system architecture, right? The networking. The first time I saw Hadoop is when I said, wow, these data parallel workloads are so different. This was late, I think maybe 2007, maybe. And then when I look at these large training jobs, they're so different. They're synchronous, the way they cohere, their power draw, it's just a completely different ball of wax, and you have to think about the technology behind it in pretty unique ways. We're taking all of the output of all these large models, making them available as cognitive services. Azure OpenAI API, OpenAI themselves have APIs that's on Azure. So we're going to democratize access to these large models so that you all can go on to build on top of it. And even in this trip in India, it's fantastic to see the use cases, right? I had a chance to meet the folks over at Seeds, which is a nonprofit, which is taking all high-def satellite imagery and creating essentially micro forecasts for disaster relief, right? So their volunteers can go to a neighborhood and say, here's what may happen during a flood, and help them evacuate to the right spot. So it's just great sort of use case of using AI, in fact, to help people, especially at a vulnerable time. The other thing that was truly for me, perhaps my most mic drop moment on this trip was what I saw with Bashini, which is the program of the National Language Translation Mission. So, obviously we are working with them along with all the other mentors of this program to enable essentially a digital public good around language translation, so that everybody in India has the ability to tap into great AI models that essentially, whether it's speech to speech, speech to text, text to speech across all languages, is possible, right? So that's, first of all, we can go on and talk about what's happening in India with digital public goods. It's phenomenal. It's just unbelievable for me to see the India stack mature and go, the use cases between the technology and the policies. There's nothing like that I see anywhere else in the world, and it's fantastic for India to lead and then contribute this back to the world even. And to me, the thing that I saw was, I did the demo in Hindi, where the gentleman asked about a particular government program in Hindi. It came back with a response, and in the response it said, go to the portal. And the person says, no, I don't want to go to the portal. Can you do this for me and figure out some other suvidha? And he did it. And that is, it's just automated it. So here is somebody speaking in any Indian language, expressing a complex thought and saying, I want to navigate all of these programs and I want to get this done. The bot comes back and sort of suggests what they should do. It says, no, that's not what I want you to even get this done for me. It's like having a co-pilot, a personal assistant, an agent that is provisioned for you to get stuff done. That last mile, they took GPT, trained it on all of the data that is government data, and essentially used the front-end language translation with the understanding of all of that data. Think about what I just described. Here is someone in India, in a rural part perhaps, speaking in their language, and essentially creating a session in which what was developed maybe 2 months ago, a month ago, as a large model somewhere else in the world, and both of those got connected. And when I saw that, I said, God, this is a changed world where the diffusion of the latest and greatest technology and its ability to make it really impactful for someone's life in a rural part of India. That's the world that I always said I dreamt of being in, and I think we're there. And it's up to us now to be able to take this and amplify it. So it's a fantastic thing to all of you for doing it. And in fact, it doesn't end. My amazement doesn't end. So in fact, the other team I met recently was a set of high school kids from the National Public School at Koramangala. In fact, I met them in Delhi yesterday. And they built this cool thing called the Bloom Box. What it does is it basically has a camera, it has speakers, it essentially does sign language translation. For anybody who has hard of hearing, can in fact be able to sort of sign language, both translation and have economic opportunity. They showed even a retail scenario in which the person who was at the vending shop had the impairment, and they were able to still be employed. And so it's just fantastic to see how some of this AI is making its way into technology that is having a real social impact. Speaking of that, ultimately, the thing we care about, right? The first product at Microsoft was a developer product. It was the basic interpreter for the Altair. A lot has happened since 1975 to now. But at the core, I think we are a company that gets up every morning to build better tools for developers so that they can build more technology. That's who we are, and that's how we will continue to be. So we care a lot about developer productivity or the Fusion teams, because it's about software developers, designers, everyone coming together, right? So it's not just about the software development is not in isolation. And the low-code, no-code tools are going to be massive trend, but we are building out everything, whether it's the low-code, no-code tools with Power Platform, or whether it is Visual Studio and VS Code, or GitHub. GitHub is where people are doing pretty amazing things, where open source projects are being born, where people from all over the world are able to contribute. It's where sort of innovation happens. But the thing that perhaps in the last year, right, having talked a lot about these LLMs and large foundational models, the place where, the first product we launched in collaboration with OpenAI and their Codex model was the GitHub Copilot. And it's phenomenal to see what has happened there, right? The ability to go in and have GitHub Copilot really. Oh, by the way, before I go there, let me do one thing. Before I go and talk about our stuff, let me congratulate the 100,000 people who over the last month have gotten certified. It's always, whenever I meet anybody at Microsoft, I say, hey, what's happening with certifications around Microsoft? In fact, yesterday, the person who was the contributor to Seeds was somebody who was at 16 years a youngest Microsoft certified engineer. And so it gives me great pleasure to see all of the folks in the room who in the last month, 100,000 of you who have gotten certifications in India, which is a record number, and it's fantastic to see that. So GitHub Copilot is changing software development. There's no question. In fact, this on New Year's Day, I was on my news feed and I saw this tweet from Andrej, which just really blew me away, right? Which is as those of you know, Andrej was at Tesla. He was the father of the autopilot, and he's let's call him a pretty elite AI developer, and he's talking about 80% of his code being written. That doesn't mean Andrej is not doing unbelievable creative work. That means that Copilot is helping him be that much more productive. That's the breakthrough, right? So that means we all can be doing so much more with our time and focusing on the most creative parts of what we can do. And that's a game changer. And that's kind of just a glimpse of, I think, what's to come. In fact, the same pattern repeats itself. Like you go into Power Apps, and you see this with Power Platform, where we are building everything from Power Apps to Power BI to Power Automate. All of these things are coming together as a powerful low-code, no-code tool. It gives me just tremendous amount of confidence that these are the kinds of things that probably will help us take this digital revolution and make it part of every domain expert's life as well. And even on the AI side, like you can do a sketch on a napkin, take a photo, it'll generate the app for you, right? That's what Power Apps already has. Power Automate, you can prompt it, right? There's a complete new field of prompt engineering, but you can prompt a workflow. You could say, hey, take my email that's coming in and then send a notification or trigger this workflow. All that can be just an English language prompt, and the workflow will just get created for you. So tremendous amount of capability for people who are even domain experts to be able to express their thoughts in natural language and have essentially the output be products like applications or workflows. One thing that I always think about it is, if you take two extremes, let's take Lambda Test. In fact, I had a chance to meet the founder from Lambda Test this morning, and this is a company that is doing for test automation what, say, Kubernetes did for container orchestration, right? Which is really create that next level of efficiency around test automation so that people can actually focus on testing versus test orchestration. But the interesting thing for me is, how they use the GitHub platform internally. It just kind of, for everybody else, I think it gives you a template of what a dev-driven organization looks like. They use GitHub as the consensus platform for everything. So if you want a new requirement, right, you do a pull request. And so to me, that's another way to think about it. When a company becomes digital first, the entire workflow of the company changes. And I think it's a good thing for all organizations to take a look at it and say, hey, the feedback loop between what is happening with a salesperson, a marketing person, and a developer, if that is translated into, oh, wow, those are all about pull requests on some consensus platform. It's just a very different way to think about how coordination happens, how the velocity of innovation happens. So it's very, very exciting to see Lambda Test and what they're doing, both their output and how they're working. The other one, just similarly, I had a chance to meet Mr. Ram Kumar, who works at SBI in Chennai. He happens to have visual impairment, but he decided that he's in marketing. He was not in IT. He sort of felt that there was a lot of paperwork that he was going through and it was pretty mundane. And he, along with two colleagues, decided that they were going to automate it. So they picked up Power Apps, learned Power Apps, and built an application now that's broadly deployed in the Chennai region. In fact, now SBI is going to take that and scale it and have even a center of excellence across the entire enterprise. But again, think about this. Perhaps more than anything else, when I see someone in India who's a domain expert, not in IT, has even a visual impairment, is able to take a digital tool, learn it, but not just use it, create with it a tool that others can use and benefit, and take pride in it, right? The fact that they now have a new skill, that new skill will have better wage support. That, to me, when we talk about empowering every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more, there cannot be like a better example than that. And it gives me great satisfaction to see the impact of it. So now let's talk about the next imperative. What's happening with work? Let's face it, right? There's no going back to 2019. The world's changed, and there is, fascinating data that is emerging around how has the world changed. The first thing is, of course, what I characterize as this productivity paranoia. You ask any leader, they'll say, God, I don't know whether we're being productive. You ask anybody who's an employee, they'll say, I'm burnt out. I'm working all the time. I don't know whether I'm sleeping at work or working from home. But that challenge at this point should not be about any individual dogma. Ultimately, we all are responsible for being productive, right? Ultimately, organizations have to move forward, produce things that are competitive in the marketplace, and competition is going to be heavy. And if that is the case, then data should help us. And so that means one of the things is aligning people's goals so that people can then drive outcomes and use that and have the flexibility needed to achieve. Because the patterns of work are only good if they're helping you achieve objectives. You should not be dogmatic, I think, about the patterns of work. You should be more, dogmatic, if anything, or accountable for outcomes. And so that's at least how we think of what needs to happen there. The other one, of course, is people come for people, right? If I say, hey, come for a meeting that I'm scheduling, nobody will show up. If I say I'm doing an event, come for the event, I'll give you good South Indian coffee. Maybe people will come. To me, I think soft skills that we need to learn as leaders to really cultivate that people-to-people connection is something that we have to rebuild. And it'll make us all better leaders for it. It'll all make us better co-workers for it. And I think that's a thing that we have to think about. Even when you convene a meeting, if two people couldn't make it for whatever reason, making sure that they feel included, right? Even if they're remote, is going to be very important. So these are all subtle things that I think we have to get much better at. Of course, you also have to re-energize. So just because you hired someone doesn't mean they have been recruited. You have to keep re-recruiting them. In fact, skilling is going to be hugely important. In fact, the interesting data point, in fact, in India, it's absolutely the case, right? You see it even on LinkedIn. The number of people sort of talking about skills is twice the global rate. And so that means it grows loyalty. Any company that is investing in helping their employees build new skills and be proud of those new skills and then giving them a wage support on those skills, I think are going to be very, very critical. So that's what's driving the three systems we're building: Microsoft 365, Teams, as well as Viva. These are all things that we're building in the context of this data. Microsoft 365 to me is just like how I was in the early 90s when I started at Microsoft. I was excited. Every day we would have Access launches, Publisher launches, the new versions of PowerPoint launches. It was just exciting time of creative expression tools. And I feel the same way now, right? With tools, whether it's Designer with Dolly built in, or whether it is Clipchamp, or whether it's Loop, all of these tools are again going to be infused with AI and really change, I think, the way people express and create. We're building out Teams as this 5-in-1 system, right? Where we have, in fact, if anything out of the pandemic, Teams has emerged as its own first-class platform, whether it's meeting, chatting, collaborating, or business process automation. All of these things are built into one platform. In fact, I would say the best feature of Teams is its app platform. So for those of you who are developers building applications so that they're discoverable inside of Teams, right? Even those line of business applications, the fact that you build a Power App, you put it into Teams, and then it becomes a collaborative app. So every one of these CRM, ERP applications now has a collaborative front end built inside of Teams. Huge opportunity for developers to expand the reach of your web apps or any other effort so that they have people workflow around it. We are continuing to evolve Teams. I'm excited about Microsoft Mesh. Mesh is really going to take the concept of presence and essentially, to me, presence has always been the dream, right? Which is, how can I have real presence without being there? And Mesh will take steps, whether it's the avatars or it's the virtual worlds, starting with meeting rooms that we'll be able to create. In fact, you'll see it in Teams and at the World Economic Forum. You'll see the next set of demonstrations of Mesh in use to create that real sense of presence in virtual worlds. So we are very excited about Mesh as a platform to break the metaverse real thing. And to me, Viva is the next logical step for us to take when it comes to productivity at the organizational level. We are taking a suite of applications from skilling and learning so that we can drive growth, to connections between front and first line workers and knowledge workers, because one of the things we learned a lot in the pandemic is how people on the front line need to be connected with the regional office, their headquarters, and there should be a communications channel for all of them. All of that we're bringing together. But one application that I'm really excited about is Viva Goals. Everybody's is doing OKRs today. And the question is, what's the ability to help organizations get aligned? Like when we talk about productivity paranoia, the one way to get out of it is to say, okay, let's have OKRs. Let's make sure there's visibility on those OKRs, and let's measure ourselves on the outcomes and the key results. And so we're building out the tool chain, just like Office for expression and creation. Think of Viva as for organizational connection and productivity. And so we are very, very excited about Viva and what it'll do for, I think, both business process and really the next generation of usage. Air India, I just came to know about all of their use cases. What Chandra and the Tata Group are doing with Air India is fantastic to see. And one of the key things in airlines is that frontline to knowledge worker collaboration, because an airline operation rests on the flow of information that really is seamless. And that's where I think Microsoft 365 system in its entirety is going to be very, very super beneficial in the context of what they're trying to get done. The next trend I wanted to very briefly talk about is the collaborative business processes. We are building our own line of business applications with Dynamics 365 with this being really centered around being much more proactive versus reactive, right? When in this AI age, in this age of data and collaboration, the idea that I go to a CRM system or an ERP system is going to change. You are not going to go to the biz app. The biz app is going to come to you in context of your workflow. So that ability to be much more proactive is what's going to be transformative in all business applications. And so we are building everything, whether it's customer service, finance, supply chain, all of it as these new generation of applications. Another area is this industrial metaverse, right? If mesh is doing stuff for presence, the other place is what's happening with digital twins. Everywhere we now have the ability to have sensors on assets that are streaming data, creating a twin. Once you have a twin, you can do simulation. You can be much more energy efficient. You can reduce waste. And then, in fact, have that as lights out operations of the asset itself. And so many examples. In fact, L&T is doing phenomenal work. They have, I think, 300,000 assets across 500 plus sites that are all connected, all using Azure IoT, being streamed in real time into a data lake, and from that data lake all the way to a Power BI front end that they have to be able to visualize what's happening with all these assets. So just an unbelievable use case of the industrial metaverse. And then the last imperative I want to briefly talk about is security, right? I mean, one of the challenges we have with security is 6 trillion is lost at cybercrime today, and it's projected that 10 trillion will be lost by 2025. So it's a real challenge. It's a real place where I think all of us will have to do some of our very, very best work, because as digital technology becomes more pervasive, this will be the challenge we will have to overcome. And the approach we have to take is the zero trust approach, which is you have to assume breach and make sure that you are able to sort of detect that breach and protect yourself and make sure that it doesn't laterally propagate, right? That's the key. In fact, I always say to all our security teams, there should only be one victim of anything new. That's the goal, right? To assume that there will never be a breach, that's just not going to be the case. But you should be great at being able to respond fast. And so in order to do that, one is you got to build an end-to-end architecture, right? You can't have multiple data planes, multiple management planes, multiple control planes. So one of the things, from identity to device protection and endpoint protection to the application protection, all the way back to the infrastructure the application using, has to be something that you can in fact set policy on, that is uniform. And not only set policy, then you have to have the operational security posture. That is, you're seeing all the data signals. In our case, we see trillions of data points across all of that. And then you can do all of the sophisticated machine learning on top of it to be able to then take that proactive step to protect, right? So zero shot. You see a new piece of malware in one endpoint, that's where it needs to end. It can't go anywhere else. You see one social engineering phishing attack, it needs to end there. And so that ability to propagate is going to be the most critical thing. And we see many examples across the country, from Axis Bank to Tata Digital to Indigo to Godrej to Flipkart, all using different parts of our technology. But security is a place where I know there's going to be a lot of innovation even coming out of the developer ecosystem in India. We want to partner with all of you, but make sure that we as a community of developers are responding to these threats in a much more energized way, because I think that'll be very much needed for us to get the benefits of all the other technology that we talk about. I also want to talk about this one program, right? I had a chance to meet a young lady from Kerala yesterday in Delhi. She read about the cyber being something that could have employment opportunity. And so she came across the Cyber Siksha program, which is specifically designed to help women to join as professionals in the cybersecurity space and train them up and give them economic opportunity. It was fantastic. So she went to Delhi. She picked up English. She picked up cyber security skills. She picked up Hindi. And now she's employed. And it's just a great program that we know we have a massive demand for cyber professionals. And it's great to see both the gender divide and the issue around the shortage of cyber skills both being bridged by this program. So it's wonderful to see. So that's where I want to end out, which is we stay grounded on our mission to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. Ultimately, though, for me, it's about being able to put all the power of this technology in the hands of other technologists so that they can go on to create more technology, to have real impact in the world across every small business, large business, nonprofit, public sector. And so couldn't be more excited to be in India, to be able to talk about all of this, to see all of what's being developed here. So thank you all very much. So with that, what I'll have is I'll have my friend Nandan Nilekani come up to stage.